Outside a sleek tower lined with glass and ego, the valet stood under a black awning, umbrellas angled, eyes lowered. Inside, Rowan Thatcher stood before a floor-to-ceiling window, his reflection superimposed over the skyline. A man who had everything and nothing. The office was sterile perfection. Matte black fixtures, minimalist leather, curated art no one truly liked. A low hum from a server room blended with faint jazz, piped in through hidden speakers. Rowan didn't hear it. He was watching people on the street below. One woman in particular. She was drenched, standing near the edge of the building's entrance, her oversized hoodie clinging to her frame, shoes soaked through. She looked hollow, just a face in the city, until she stepped forward toward the glass doors. His phone buzzed. "Rowan, the investor meeting's moved up. Need you in boardroom 3, came the assistant's voice over Bluetooth. He pressed a button on his desk. On my way. Still, he watched the woman through the glass for one more beat. She approached the door, hesitant. Then, clearly gathering nerve, she opened it halfway, poking her head in. "Excuse me," she said, voice barely audible. Rowan's assistant blinked at her from the desk, startled. She looked like trouble, unkempt, dripping on the tile. "I'm sorry, miss, but please, just 5 minutes inside. I'm not asking for money, I just need somewhere dry." Rowan had started walking toward the elevators. He paused, watching, evaluating. She met his eyes for the briefest second, and he laughed. Not loud, not cruel, more a scoff, a dismissal. Like she'd asked if she could sit in the CEO's chair for fun. "Wrong building," he muttered. The doors closed behind him. 17 years later, Ivy Carter stood on the same street, this time on the opposite side, dry, clean. Wrapped in a tailored wool coat, coffee in hand, leather portfolio tucked under one arm. Not a drop of rain touched her. The hotel across the street was her latest client. A boutique renovation of a 1920s building that had once been a bank, then an abandoned co-op. Now it was destined to become one of Seattle's crown jewels. And Ivy Carter was the lead designer. She sipped her coffee, eyes tracing the building's sharp lines and ornate cornices. Her assistant, Cal, stepped beside her with a clipboard. "Walk through in 15. Mr. Dean is already inside," he said, flipping pages. "Also, someone from Archway Media wants to do a piece on female-led design firms. Do you want to?" "I'll think about it," Ivy said, gaze still fixed on the stonework. "Let's get through the pitch first." Her tone was calm, polished, but beneath it, her heart thudded like she was still standing in that same hoodie, soaked to the bone. No one in her world now knew who she'd been. Not even Marcus Dean, her business partner, who had known her for the better part of 10 years. Only 2 people truly knew, her sister Ruby and Norma, the bookstore owner who'd once handed her a hot tea and said, "Sit. You're safe here." That moment had rewired something in her. But what happened before that? The laugh, the look of dismissal, the shame that clung to her skin harder than the rain. Those memories never left. Inside the hotel, the space smelled of sawdust and old ambition. Tarps covered floors, scaffolding loomed overhead, and voices echoed in clipped, professional tones. Ivy walked through the skeleton of the lobby, her heels clicking like punctuation marks. Marcus waved her over, wearing his usual navy overcoat, unbuttoned, hair tousled from the wind. "Look who beat me here," he smiled. "They've done a good job clearing out the south corridor. We're ready to walk the clients through the mood boards upstairs." She nodded, handing him the updated layouts. "I refined the lighting plan last night. I want the ambient tones to mimic how the space felt when it was still a bank. Low, reverent, historic but softened." "Exactly what I was thinking," Marcus said. He studied her for a second. "You okay?" "I'm fine," she replied. Too fast. He raised a brow, but didn't press. They climbed a temporary stairwell to the mezzanine, where panels had been propped against the wall. Mood boards, color palettes, fabric swatches. Ivy ran her hand along the edge of a velvet sample, the deep indigo calming her pulse. Then she heard his name. Rowan Thatcher's team confirmed for 11:30. She turned. Cal was talking to the site manager. Ivy's hand froze on the fabric. The room dimmed. Not literally, but her focus narrowed like a camera lens. She hadn't heard that name in years. Not since she read it on a news site. Thatcher Tech IPO hits 1.3 billion valuation. Rowan Thatcher. He was back. Her breath hitched, not from fear, not even from anger, from the eerie way life curved back in on itself, like rain hitting the same sidewalk in new storms. She composed herself quickly. Marcus didn't notice, absorbed in arranging the renderings. Downstairs the lobby was filling with voices, footsteps, laughter, and then faintly a familiar cadence, confident, smooth, unaware. Ivy didn't look over the mezzanine railing. Not yet. Instead, she stepped back into the temporary office. She needed a second, not to panic, just to recalibrate. Let it go, she told herself. You are not that girl anymore. And yet, standing in the shadows of this building, she felt 17 again. The rain picked up outside. The windows fogged faintly. Ivy pressed her hand to the cool glass and stared down at the street. Same sidewalk. Same city. Different woman. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ruby. Mum's checkup was good. Still asking why you work so much. I told her you just like clean lines more than dates. Ivy smiled. Just slightly. She typed back. Tell her I'm building a world she'll want to live in. Then, slowly, she turned back toward the lobby. Because at 11:30, she would walk downstairs. And Rowan Thatcher wouldn't just see her. He'd remember. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Ivy stepped into the lobby, her breath even, her posture effortless. From the outside, she was the picture of calm control. Hair smooth, lips painted a soft rose, blazer pressed. But inside, her heart had begun its own quiet drumbeat. She didn't have to see him yet. Not immediately, but she knew he was close. She scanned the crowd with measured discretion. Contractors reviewed floor plans with iPads. The hotel manager chatted with a lighting consultant. Marcus was near the reception area, deep in conversation. And then, a laugh. Smooth, polished, familiar. She turned. Rowan stood beside a tall man in a charcoal coat, gesturing toward the exposed beams in the lobby ceiling, clearly making some half-sarcastic comment. He was older now, sharper jawline, the early edges of grey at his temples, tailored coat draped perfectly across his shoulders. Success clung to him like a second skin. He hadn't seen her yet. Ivy could have walked the other way. She had every reason to, but something inside her anchored her feet in place. Hey, there you are, Marcus said, walking up beside her. You okay? I'm fine, she said, not breaking her gaze. Marcus followed her line of sight, then nodded slightly. That's him. She didn't answer, but her silence was enough. I've seen that face on tech magazine covers, he said quietly. Didn't realize you had history. She folded her arms. It's not history. It's context. Marcus looked at her. Want me to run interference? She shook her head. Number he doesn't even remember me. But even as she said it, she knew the universe didn't spin this precisely for nothing. Not in this city. Not with this timing. Not when she was standing on the verge of the biggest contract of her career. Rowan's gaze swept the room again. And this time, it stopped. On her. There was a flicker in his expression. Uncertainty, then recognition. His smile faltered just enough for her to see the wheels turning behind his eyes. She gave him nothing. Not a smile, not a nod. Just held his gaze for a second longer than polite. Then turned away. Let's get ready for the walkthrough, she said to Marcus, already heading toward the far stairwell. In the temporary office on the second floor, Ivy stared at the design boards arranged along the walls. The space was quiet. Rain tapped against the high windows like it had something to say. Franny always said the past doesn't knock, it barges in, usually when you least want company. The door creaked open behind her. Ivy. Her chest tightened. But it wasn't Rowan. Ruby stood there in a yellow raincoat, soaked at the edges, holding a paper bag. You brought lunch? Ivy blinked, surprised. Thought you'd forget to eat again, Ruby said, stepping inside. I figured since I was off today, I'd swing by. I didn't expect... Her voice trailed off as she looked around the polished, minimal workspace. Wow, this is... fancy. It's functional, Ivy said softly. She took the bag and set it on the desk. You didn't have to... I know, Ruby interrupted, but I wanted to. They sat in silence for a moment, the sound of Ruby unwrapping a sandwich breaking the quiet. I saw him, Ivy said finally. Ruby didn't ask who. She didn't need to. And? He looked right through me at first. Then, maybe not. Ruby frowned, chewing slowly. Are you okay? I don't know yet, Ivy admitted. You don't owe him anything, not even a reaction. Ivy nodded, but the weight in her chest didn't lift. It's not about him, Ruby. It's about who I was and who I became because of moments like that. Ruby tilted her head. And who are you now? Ivy hesitated, still figuring it out. A soft knock at the door. Marcus peeked in. We're starting the walkthrough in 10. Ruby stood, brushing crumbs from her jeans. Go make rich men pay for good lighting, she said with a smirk. Ivy smiled faintly. Thanks for coming. Ruby paused at the door. He doesn't define you, Ivy. Don't let him make you question what you built. And just like that, she was gone. The walkthrough began in the atrium. Ivy led the group, clients, investors, and Rowan's team, through the proposed layout, explaining how historic elements would be preserved while integrating modern textures and tones. Her voice didn't waver once. Rowan asked a few questions, brief, neutral, professional. But during a pause near the grand staircase, he approached. Ivy, he said quietly. She turned toward him, no warmth in her expression, no smile. I wasn't sure it was you at first, he added. It's me, she said simply. There was a silence between them that buzzed with everything unspoken. You've done well, he said. This design, it's impressive. I don't need your approval, she replied. I didn't mean it like that. She looked at him, really looked. Do you remember where we've met before? He paused. She saw the flicker again, the unease. I think so, he said. You laughed, she said evenly. I was soaked, hungry, asking for a dry place to stand. Ivy, you don't need to explain, she cut in. I'm not here for apologies. I'm here to work. The silence after that wasn't awkward. It was necessary. I'd like to talk more, if you're open to it, he said. She met his eyes. There was sincerity there now. Maybe even regret. I'm not sure I have time, she said. But I'll let you know. She turned, the click of her heels sharp against the floor, leaving him in the echo of his own memory. Back in the office, Marcus leaned against the window. How'd it go? It went, she said. He glanced at her, thoughtful. You okay? She nodded, but her voice was quieter now. It's strange. I thought seeing him would undo me, but instead I feel still, like a chapter I never closed finally stopped screaming. Marcus smiled gently. Sometimes all you need is the chance to look back and realize you're not there anymore. The rain was still falling when she left the hotel that evening, but this time she didn't flinch when it touched her skin. Seattle's skyline shimmered in the misted twilight, As Ivy stepped into her apartment, the warmth of the space greeting her like a soft breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the fog-softened view beyond, city lights blinking like slow heartbeats. She dropped her keys into the ceramic bowl by the door and leaned against the wall, exhaling. The silence here was curated, intentional. No TV murmuring in the background, no music filling the air, just space. Clean, elegant, and controlled. And yet, her mind refused to be still. Rowan's voice echoed faintly in the back of her memory. "I'd like to talk more." She'd brushed it off, politely, firmly. But the truth was, something had shifted in her the moment she heard him say her name. Ivy. Not just Miss Carter or the designer. He remembered. Maybe not the moment exactly, but enough to make his gaze linger a second too long. Enough to make her feel that old fracture twitch under the surface. She peeled off her coat, hung it neatly, and walked to the kitchen. The kettle clicked as it began to heat, and she pulled down her favorite mug. Deep green ceramic, the one Franny had given her years ago. As the water bubbled, her phone buzzed. A message. Rowan Thatcher. "I hope it's okay to message. I realize I was out of line today, too forward. I'm sure you're busy, but if you ever want to talk, really talk, I'd like to." She stared at the words. They weren't dramatic. They didn't beg, but they sat in her palm with unexpected weight. She didn't answer. Not yet. The next morning brought a different kind of storm, one of deadlines and unfinished samples. At the office, Marcus stood at the drafting table, flipping through swatches like a man searching for lost treasure. "These fabric suppliers are playing games," he muttered. "The beige we approved, back-ordered, indefinitely." Ivy walked in, dropping her bag onto her chair. "What about the sea glass option from the Vancouver line?" "It's on the truck, allegedly. We'll need to pivot if it doesn't arrive by Thursday." She nodded, already scanning the revised layout pinned on the wall. Her eyes were sharp, movement sufficient, but Marcus noticed the flicker behind them. "You didn't sleep," he said. Not a question. "No." "Rowan?" She didn't look at him. He messaged. "And?" I ignored it. Marcus set down the swatches, leaning back against the desk. "You know you don't have to engage, but you also don't have to carry it like a punishment." She sighed. "I don't know what he wants." "Maybe just a conversation." Ivy shook her head. "People don't reach out like that without wanting something. Guilt isn't the foundation for a connection." Marcus studied her for a moment. "I wasn't talking about romance." Her gaze snapped to him, sharp but quiet. "Weren't you?" Silence stretched between them, thicker than the fog outside the windows. Finally, he cleared his throat. "You deserve something honest, Ivy, whatever form it takes." The tension remained in the room long after their conversation ended. By late afternoon, Ivy found herself staring out at the city from her office window, her phone still on the desk beside her. The message remained unanswered. There was a time she'd have deleted it instantly. No room for ghosts. No room for men who only remembered your name when it became profitable to know it. But now there was something less simple about the weight she carried. She picked up her phone, opened her texts, typed, "I'm not ready to talk about the past, but I'll meet you for coffee. As professionals, neutral ground." Sent, and instantly the knot in her chest pulled tighter. The next day, she chose her outfit with surgical precision. Charcoal slacks, a cream blouse, a coat that hugged her shoulders like armor. No red, no softness. She wasn't here to be a symbol of forgiveness or nostalgia. She was here to hold the ground she'd earned. They met at a small cafe tucked beneath an old theater, all exposed brick and Edison bulbs. The place smelled like burnt espresso and rain-soaked scarves. Rowan was already seated, coffee untouched, hands clasped in front of him like a man waiting for a verdict. He stood as she approached, offering a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Thanks for coming." "I didn't say I came to talk," she replied, sitting down. His smile faltered. Fair enough. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The room hummed with the low murmur of strangers. Ivy glanced toward the window, watching pedestrians shuffle past, umbrellas tilted against the drizzle. I owe you an apology, he said finally. You do. I was a different person then. Maybe, she replied, but you were old enough to know better. He nodded, swallowing. You're right. She didn't offer comfort. That wasn't what this was. I've thought about that day more than I should, he added, and I didn't recognize you at first, which probably makes it worse. It doesn't matter, she said. You weren't supposed to remember me. I wasn't supposed to end up here. You deserve to, he said quickly. No, she said, her voice low, firm. I earned it. His eyes flicked up to hers, and in that moment something passed between them. Not forgiveness, not quite, but a shift, an acknowledgement. I'm not here to rewrite anything, Rowan said. I look around sometimes and everything I've built feels like scaffolding. You ever feel that way? She let the question hang. Then, every day, until I stopped needing it to hold me up. He nodded, slowly. A pause. I'd like to work with your firm, he said, carefully. Not because of guilt, because you're good. Better than good. She raised an eyebrow. This isn't a pitch meeting. I know, but it's not charity either. I meant what I said about your design. The barista passed by, placing 2 mugs on the table. Ivy wrapped her hands around hers, letting the warmth settle into her fingers. I'll think about it, she said, and she meant it. But as she sipped her coffee, she knew one thing with certainty. The next chapter wouldn't be about proving anything to Rowan Thatcher. It would be about deciding who she let walk beside her and who she simply left in the rearview mirror. The city was quiet in that way only early mornings could make it. Before the coffee shops filled, before meetings started, before the noise began. Ivy stood by the large windows in her office, watching the sky shift from charcoal to lavender. She'd arrived before sunrise, needing the stillness, needing space to think. Her coffee had gone cold in her hands. She hadn't been able to sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, fragments played back in her mind. Rowan's voice, his apology. The way he looked at her, not with pity, but with something dangerously close to understanding. That unsettled her more than the memory of his laugh ever did. She didn't want understanding. She wanted distance, clarity. I figured I'd find you here. She turned. Marcus stood in the doorway, a breakfast sandwich in one hand, folder in the other. His hair was still damp from the rain, curls slightly disheveled. You're early, she said. You're earlier. He stepped inside, setting the folder on her desk, and handing her the sandwich without asking. She took it, grateful despite herself. He leaned on the edge of her desk, unwrapping his own. So, did you meet him? She didn't answer right away. He apologized, she said finally. And I didn't throw my coffee in his face, if that's what you're wondering. Marcus smirked. That would have been dramatic, but very off-brand. He wants to work with us. That made Marcus pause, mid-bite. As in, contract, client? He says it's not about guilt. And do you believe him? I'm trying not to care either way. Marcus nodded slowly, but something flickered behind his eyes. He didn't push, not yet. But she saw the hesitation, the quiet concern that lingered just beneath his usual ease. You think it's a bad idea, she said. I think it's complicated, and I know how hard you've worked to build something clean, separate. I'm not naive, she said. I know you're not. That's why I'm asking if this is going to cost you more than it gives. The question sat between them like fog on glass, blurring what was clear. Before she could respond, Cal knocked lightly and peeked in. Sorry, hate to interrupt, but Franny Sanford is downstairs. That pulled Ivy out of her thoughts. Franny? Cal nodded. Didn't say what it was about. Just asked if you had a minute. Marcus looked at her. She doesn't usually show up unannounced. I'll go down, Ivy said, already moving toward the door. Franny was waiting by the reception desk. Coat still wet from the drizzle, scarf looped loosely around her neck. Her presence filled the room. Not loud, not flashy, just steady, the kind of presence that made people breathe easier without knowing why. Franny, Ivy greeted her. Is everything okay? Franny smiled. It's not a crisis, but I needed to look you in the eye for this. Ivy led her to the lounge just off the lobby. Warm lighting, velvet armchairs, and a pot of tea that Cal had already placed on the table. She sat opposite her mentor, heart still unsettled. Franny poured them each a cup before speaking. I heard about Rowan, she said, tone gentle but pointed. Ivy's eyes narrowed. News travels fast. Franny raised a brow. You work in design, I work in community. People talk, especially when old wounds walk into new rooms. Ivy didn't answer, just stared at the steam rising from her tea. You're not the same girl he laughed at, Franny continued, but parts of her are still here. That's not weakness, Ivy. That's memory. I don't want to make decisions from memory, Ivy said. I want to make them from the person I am now. Then ask yourself this. Is working with him a step forward or a loop? Ivy's hands tightened slightly around her cup. I'm trying to keep the emotions separate. Franny smiled softly. We both know you can't. You feel everything, Ivy. You always have. That's your power. Don't try to mute it just because it's inconvenient. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was honest. Franny stood, wrapping her scarf tighter. You'll do what's right. I trust you with that. Ivy walked her to the door, and just before Franny stepped out into the rain, she turned back. But remember, sometimes growth looks like letting go, and sometimes it looks like staying in the room long enough to speak your truth. That night, Ivy sat on her apartment floor, surrounded by sketchbooks from years ago, worn edges, coffee stains, designs drawn with borrowed pencils and silent hope. She opened one of the oldest and flipped through it slowly. The last page stopped her. A crude sketch of a space, a cafe, small, intimate, warm. Not her best work. But there was a note scrawled at the bottom, in her own handwriting, barely legible. One day, when I don't have to prove I deserve to be inside. She stared at the words for a long time. Then she closed the book, picked up her phone, typed a message to Marcus. Let's take the pitch. If we get the contract, I want full creative lead. He doesn't get to direct the vision. We do. Marcus replied almost immediately. You got it. I'm with you. She paused, then typed again, thank you, for asking the hard questions. Marcus didn't reply right away, but when he did, it was just one line. I ask because I care. You know that, right? Her throat tightened. She stared at that message longer than she expected to, then set the phone down. Outside, the rain hadn't stopped, but it no longer sounded like static. It sounded like a beginning. The pitch was scheduled for Thursday morning, but Ivy had been mentally scripting it for days. The layout, the textures, the emotion she wanted the space to evoke, it was all there, layered in her mind like brushstrokes waiting for the right moment. Still, no amount of planning could ease the pressure humming beneath her skin. She walked into the office conference room early, the floor-to-ceiling windows fogged by morning condensation. The model of the proposed space stood centered on the table. Clean lines, warm wood, ambient lighting design captured in translucent overlays. Marcus was already there, sleeves rolled up, flipping through a printed booklet. You didn't sleep again, he said, without looking up. I'm fine. You always say that when you're not. She glanced at him. His concern was subtle, tucked under a layer of dry wit and architectural diagrams. But it was there, always had been. He held up a revised rendering. I added your lighting gradient suggestions. You were right. It softens the edges without losing the structure. Good, she said, trying to focus, but her thoughts kept straying. Rowan would be in the room. She hadn't seen him since the cafe meeting. No messages, no calls, nothing, which somehow unsettled her more than if he'd followed up immediately. She didn't know what to expect. Professional detachment, friendly rapport, something more layered, more complicated. Marcus seemed to read the shift in her posture. I'll take lead on the intro, he offered. You come in strong with the design walkthrough. Thanks, she said quietly. The door opened and Cal stepped in, expression tight. They're here. Ivy straightened her shoulders. The clients entered in pairs. Executives, brand reps, a few unfamiliar faces. Then Rowan walked in. Last. He looked different. Not visibly. But something in his eyes had changed. Less polished, more present. Their eyes met briefly. A pause. No smile. No nod. Just recognition. Marcus launched into the opening pitch, welcoming the room, laying out the vision for the redesign of the tech campus Rowan's company was relocating. Ivy watched the audience, read the shifts in posture, the reactions. She waited for her moment. Then Marcus stepped aside. Ivy walked to the front. I want to talk about emotion, she began. Spaces are about function, yes, but they're also about how people feel when they enter. The best designs don't shout. They whisper. They remember you. She clicked the remote. Slides changed behind her. Renderings of warm wood tones, modular lighting, mixed textures. This building isn't just an office. It's a signal. A message to everyone who walks through it that their ideas matter. That creativity isn't confined to corner offices. She paused, stepped closer to the table model. When I designed this space, I thought about contrast. Cold steel and warm light. Historic structure and modern innovation. And most of all, transparency. Her voice softened slightly. Because when a place lets you be seen, fully seen, that's when real work happens. The room was silent, focused, even Rowan. She took a breath, finished the presentation with final specs, budget tiers, and projected milestones, then stepped back. Marcus nodded. We'll open it up to questions. The questions came, technical, financial, logistical. Ivy answered each with precision, clear, composed, until one of the execs turned to Rowan. You've been quiet, Rowan. Thoughts? He looked at Ivy, then stood. I've been thinking about transparency, he said slowly, and context, about how the spaces we create reflect who we are, or who we want to be. The room waited. He didn't look away from her. When you walk through a place like this, it can tell a story about evolution, about second chances, and I think that matters. He finally looked back at the others. I think this team gets that. The room shifted. People nodded. The energy changed. Later, after everyone left, Ivy stood by the windows again, watching clouds roll in over the sound. The weight of the pitch still clung to her, half adrenaline, half dread. Rowan appeared in the reflection. Do you have a moment? He asked. She didn't turn. Is this about the pitch? No. She turned then, slowly. I didn't want to say too much in front of them, he said. But I meant what I said about second chances. You're not the one who needs one, she replied. He flinched slightly. I'm aware, I don't know why you agreed to see me again, why you let this happen. I didn't do it for you. I know. A beat passed. I'm not trying to undo what happened, he added. I can't. I was arrogant, dismissive. But when I saw you at that hotel, your presence, your work, I realized how small I used to think. Ivy studied him. And what do you want now? He hesitated. A conversation. One that isn't about business. Her silence was a wall, then a window. Maybe, she said at last, but only if you can sit in the quiet long enough to hear the hard parts. He nodded. I can do that. She walked away without saying goodbye. Outside, rain began to fall again, not harsh, just enough to blur the glass, to soften the lines between what had been and what could still unfold. The rain hadn't stopped. It washed across the city like a second skin, blurring the skyline, muting the colors of everything outside Ivy's office window. But inside, it was warm, still, as if the storm had no permission here. She stood in the middle of the room, arms crossed, heart oddly unsettled. The pitch had been a success. Marcus had already gotten confirmation they were being seriously considered. Rowan's endorsement had shifted the room in ways she couldn't deny. And yet, it wasn't the potential win that lingered in her chest. It was his voice, his restraint, the way he'd looked at her. Not as a symbol, not as a story, but as someone real. A knock broke her silence. Ruby poked her head in, cheeks pink from the cold. I brought your favorite, she said, holding up a paper bag with a grin. Ivy's face softened. You didn't have to. I did, Ruby said, stepping in fully. Because you forget to eat when you're stressed, and because I had an hour between shifts. Ivy reached for the bag and took a seat on the couch. Ruby followed, curling her legs underneath her. So, Ruby asked, eyes bright. Did you nail it? We did, Ivy said. The room was with us. Ruby studied her. But you're not celebrating. Ivy hesitated, then exhaled. Rowan was in the room. Right, Ruby said carefully. And he spoke, not about the past, about second chances. He was measured, almost humble. That's new, Ruby said, biting into her sandwich. I think he means it, Ivy said quietly. Ruby froze. Mean what? That he's sorry? Or that he wants something more than a project? I don't know. Ruby leaned forward. Ivy, you need to be careful. I know. I mean it. This isn't some old flame that fizzled out. He humiliated you when you were at your lowest. That leaves a scar. You don't just reopen that door because he knows the right words now. Ivy didn't respond right away. She just looked out the window again, the reflection of the two of them flickering in the glass. I'm not letting him in, she said, finally. I'm just not running from the moment either. Ruby reached out, placed a hand on her sister's. I just don't want to see you fall for someone who once decided you weren't worth seeing. The air shifted, not sharp, but real. Later that evening, Ivy stayed behind in the office long after the others left. She walked the perimeter of the layout boards, trailing her fingers across the smooth edges of the plans, the renderings. Her vision was becoming reality, piece by piece. And then, her phone buzzed. A message. Rowan Thatcher. Tomorrow night. There's a small gallery opening in Belltown. Architecture photography. Quiet, thoughtful, no crowd. I'd like to take you. Not for business, for conversation. She stared at the screen, and for a long time she didn't move. Then, slowly she typed, Why? The reply came quickly. Because I want to know the parts of your story that don't fit on a blueprint. She stared at the message. Everything in her said to guard the space she'd built around herself, to keep him at a safe distance. But another voice whispered, Wasn't this what healing looked like too? Not forgetting, but deciding what you did with the memory, she replied. 1 hour, and I leave if it feels performative. His answer came without hesitation. Deal. The next evening, the gallery space was almost hidden, tucked behind a florist shop, just off a quiet brick alley. The rain had eased, but the pavement was still wet, glowing under golden street lamps. Rowan was already there, waiting beneath the small awning, hands tucked into the pockets of his coat. When he saw her, his face shifted. No smirk, no polished charm, just something steady, intentional. You came, he said, for now. Inside, the gallery was minimalist. White walls, soft lighting, photographs mounted in careful alignment. The images were stark. Urban structures, forgotten doorways, broken windows catching sunlight. They walked slowly. Architecture as memory, Ivy murmured, reading one of the placards. Interesting concept. Do you think spaces remember us? He asked. She glanced at him. Number, I think we remember them. And we carry that weight. He nodded, absorbing that. A few moments passed before he spoke again. I drove past that building last week, he said quietly. She didn't need to ask which one. I parked, got out, stood on the sidewalk. Same glass, same awning. I kept thinking, what if I'd said something different that day? She looked at a photo in front of her, an abandoned library, shelves still holding crumpled pages. You would have forgotten me anyway, she said. It wasn't about what you said. It was about who you were then. He didn't argue. She turned to face him. I'm not angry anymore, but I don't need your regret. I'm not offering regret, he said, eyes steady. I'm offering respect, curiosity, whatever that's worth. She studied him, and for the first time, she saw the version of him that wasn't trying to win, or fix, or explain. Just listen. She nodded once, then talked less, and listened more. He smiled barely. Deal. They walked through the rest of the exhibit in a silence that didn't strain. And when she left, she didn't look back. Not because she didn't care, but because she finally didn't need to. The weeks that followed moved with a quiet intensity, like the first breath before a storm. Ivy buried herself in finalizing the project designs, working late, reviewing details with Marcus, refining everything from tile texture to acoustic ceiling materials. The pitch had been accepted, the contract was theirs, and the project, the tech campus renovation, was now real. It should have felt like triumph. But something else hovered in the air. Rowan. He hadn't pushed since the gallery night. No unexpected messages. No lingering stares in meetings. But his presence was still there, threaded into the work, into the building, into the quiet moments when Ivy caught herself wondering if trust could be rebuilt, even in fragments. One evening, Ivy stood over the layout boards alone, tracing her hand along the notes she and Marcus had jotted in pencil across the margins. Seating cluster here feels too cold, she whispered aloud to no one. Needs warmth, needs, intention. She pulled a fresh page from her sketchpad, sat down on the edge of the drafting table, and began redrawing. Footsteps approached softly behind her. Tell me that's not another all-nighter. She looked up to find Marcus leaning against the doorframe, takeout in one hand, 2 drinks in the other. I was tweaking, she said, not spiraling. He stepped in, handed her a container, and sat across from her. Vietnamese. You're welcome. She smiled, soft and tired. You're a good man, Marcus. I try, he said, then added more quietly, though lately I'm not sure where I fit anymore. She looked at him, brows pulling together. What do you mean? He poked at his food for a second, not meeting her eyes. I mean, things are changing, fast. Between you and Rowan, the way he looks at you, the way you don't flinch anymore. Ivy set her container down. Marcus, I'm not accusing, he said quickly. I'm just adjusting. You and I, we built this from the ground up. Every client, every sleepless night. I guess I didn't realize how much of my foundation depended on knowing where we stood. A silence fell. Not cold, but charged. You've always been the one person I never had to explain myself to, Ivy said softly. You just knew. You saw me before anyone else did. I still do, he said, which is why I noticed the difference. She hesitated. Nothing's happened. Yet. She didn't argue. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I just need to know that if things shift, you and I won't. Ivy met his eyes. And for the first time in years, she saw a kind of vulnerability there that had nothing to do with architecture or ambition. "I would never let that happen," she said. "You're part of this. You're part of me." He nodded, but his smile didn't quite reach. Later that night, as she walked the nearly empty hallways of the office, Ivy stopped by the materials room. Swatches hung in color-coded rows, tiles labeled, lighting samples laid out like art pieces. She touched the edge of a marble slab. Everything she'd built was here. Her life had shape now, direction control, and still something was shifting. The next morning brought a surprise. Franny called. "Got time to meet this afternoon?" she asked. "I've got someone I want you to meet." Ivy blinked. "Franny, what?" "Just say yes. 1:30. At the little coffee shop on 6th. When Ivy arrived, Franny was already seated, sipping tea, her hair wrapped in a vibrant scarf that matched her lipstick. Across from her sat a woman in her early 20s. Slim, nervous, notebook clutched like a life raft. "This is Celine," Franny said. "She's got the eye, but she doesn't have the access." Celine glanced up, hopeful. "Hi, I've followed your work for a while." Ivy sat slowly. "How do you two know each other?" "Same way I met you," Franny said. She wandered into the store looking for warmth and found a blueprint. Celine flushed. Franny leaned in. "Ivy, I know your plate's full, but maybe she shadows you a few hours a week, picks up what she can, gets her foot in a door no one's opening for her." Ivy looked at the girl, her nervous fingers, the hunger in her eyes, and for a moment she saw herself. "I can't promise much," Ivy said, "but I can promise I'll see you." Celine's eyes welled instantly. "That's more than I've ever been promised." After they left, Franny walked with Ivy for a few blocks. "She reminds me of you," Franny said. "Same stubborn light." Ivy didn't answer. She was watching the sidewalk. "You're shifting," Franny added. "I know. You okay with that?" "I think I have to be." Franny smiled. "Good, because standing still doesn't suit you." That evening, as the sun lowered itself behind Seattle's skyline, Ivy stood on the rooftop of the design studio, alone, watching the light flicker over the water. Her phone buzzed again. "Rowan Thatcher. Would you meet me for dinner? No pressure, no expectation, just company." She stared at the message for a long moment. Then, before she could talk herself out of it, she typed, "1 hour, public place. I leave when I want." His response was immediate. "I'll be there." And for the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't let herself feel. Not fear, but anticipation. The restaurant was quiet, the kind of place where conversations were private by design. Low lighting, booths tucked into dark wood corners, and a soft jazz hum that coated the space like velvet. Ivy stood at the entrance, coat still clinging to her shoulders, eyes scanning until she saw him. Rowan was already seated near the back, 2 glasses of water on the table, no phone in sight. He looked up the moment she approached, rising from his chair with a tension that felt practiced but not hollow. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "Neither was I." She slid into the booth, folding her hands in her lap, letting the quiet settle between them. There was something different in the way he looked at her tonight. Less curiosity, more reverence. It unnerved her, or maybe it disappointed her. He didn't speak right away. Just studied her face, like trying to memorize something he already knew he didn't deserve to forget. The server came and went. She ordered tea. He asked for a simple pasta. "You look tired," he said after a pause. "I run a firm." He gave a short breath of a laugh. "Still sharp." She looked at him evenly. "Still not here for small talk." He nodded, serious now. "Okay, then let's not waste time." Another pause. He folded his hands on the table. "I didn't expect you to say yes, but I'm glad you did. There are things I've wanted to say, clarify, not to rewrite the past, but because I don't want silence to be the only thing between us. She tilted her head slightly. And what exactly are you hoping fills that space? His mouth pressed into a line. Truth. Ivy sipped her tea, the heat grounding her. All right then. Truth. Why now? Why me? Rowan sat back, exhaling slowly. Because after all these years, after everything I've achieved, I still remember your face. Not just from that day, but what I felt when I saw you again at the hotel. You didn't flinch. You didn't try to belong. You just were. That's what survival looks like, she said softly. His voice dropped. I think it's what strength looks like. She didn't reply right away. The server returned with plates. The clink of silverware filled the silence between them for a few beats. I built my life in defiance of that moment, she said, finally. That day you looked through me. It told me the world had already decided what I was worth, and I spent years trying to prove otherwise. I see that now, he said, and I hate that I ever contributed to that. Regret doesn't fix it. I'm not trying to fix it. I'm trying to be accountable for it. She studied him, no defensive edge in his tone. Just wait. You've changed, she admitted. But change isn't an apology. I know. That's why I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking to know you, now, as you are. Something tightened in her chest. She set her tea down carefully. I don't do casual anymore, she said. Not in work, not in relationships. I've spent too many years holding myself together to risk falling apart again for someone who doesn't know how to stay. His expression softened. I'm not walking into this lightly. You don't get to say that. Not yet. He nodded, accepting that. Another pause. I had to lose a lot to get here, he said quietly. My father passed 3 years ago, and it made me realize how much of my life I've spent chasing legacy instead of meaning. Ivy's gaze flicked to him. And I'm supposed to be what? Your meaning? No, he said gently. But you remind me what it looks like. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. I don't need rescuing, Rowan. I know, he said. I just want to walk beside you, if you'll let me. The silence that followed felt different. Not filled with tension, but with choices. When they walked out into the night, the rain had stopped. The streets were slick with reflection, the city glowing soft gold and cobalt beneath the clouds. Rowan walked her to her car. They stood beside it, keys in her hand, neither moving. Ivy, he said, his voice almost hesitant. Do you believe people can really change? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at the wet pavement, then back up at him. I believe people reveal who they are when no one's watching. He nodded slowly, as if that response settled something deeper than any yes or no could. I won't rush you, he said. Good, she replied, opening the door, because I don't move fast for anyone anymore. As she drove off, she checked her mirror once. Rowan was still standing there, watching, not chasing. And for the first time in a long time, Ivy felt the shift of something not breaking, but beginning, quietly, deliberately, on her own terms. Ivy stood in the entryway of the newly gutted building, rain dripping from the edges of her umbrella, as she looked up at the rusted signage hanging above the door. The old cafe had once been a cornerstone of the neighborhood, back when people still lingered in places, without rushing to the next thing. Now, it was just beams and potential, waiting to be reshaped. Her firm had taken the project quietly, a pro bono renovation in collaboration with a local women's housing initiative. It wasn't about headlines. It was about roots. Celine was already inside, kneeling near the floor with samples fanned out in careful rows. She looked up when Ivy stepped through the threshold. Morning, Celine said. A smudge of dust streaked across her cheek. You're early, Ivy replied, folding her umbrella. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the tile textures from yesterday, and I had an idea, something that feels vintage but still grounded. Ivy walked over, crouched beside her. The girl's sketches were messy but full of heart, the kind of raw instinct Ivy hadn't seen in a long time. You've got a good eye, she said, but trust your hands too. Let them guide the scale. Celine nodded, visibly trying to absorb every word. Then, hesitantly, do you ever get scared? Like that you're building something important and you don't want to mess it up? Ivy paused, eyes softening. Every time I start something that matters. The girl smiled, and for a moment, Ivy saw herself again, hungry for a future that still felt impossibly far away. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She stood and checked the screen. Ruby, need to talk. Today. It's Mom. Please. The blood in her body slowed. Celine noticed the shift in her expression. Everything okay? Ivy offered a tight smile. Family thing. I'll be back later this afternoon. Keep working with the swatches. Don't second guess. She stepped outside, just as the clouds opened again. This time, she didn't run from the rain. Later that day, in the tiny waiting room of the clinic, Ruby sat curled in one of the hard plastic chairs, her jacket still damp, her hands fidgeted with the strap of her purse. She fainted again, Ruby said softly when Ivy arrived. At work this time, hit her arm on the counter. Ivy sat down slowly, eyes fixed ahead. Why didn't you call sooner? I didn't want to worry you, Ruby said, voice thin. You've had so much going on. The contract, the pitch, Rowan. This isn't about him, Ivy cut in. This is Mom. You should have called me. Ruby looked at her then, guilt swimming behind her eyes. I didn't want you to feel like you had to fix everything again. Ivy's chest ached, not from anger, but from recognition. That old pattern of carrying it all, of being the one who didn't flinch, the one who always showed up, even when she was falling apart inside. She's stable, Ruby continued, but the doctor said we need to get serious about long-term care. Something consistent, reliable. She won't agree to that, Ivy said. You know she won't. Then we make the decision for her. Ivy pressed her fingers to her temple. The weight of her two worlds, career and family, colliding in a quiet explosion. I'll talk to her, she said eventually. We'll figure it out. They rode in silence to the house. Inside, their mother sat in her armchair, a blanket over her knees, eyes tired but still sharp. You both look like someone died, she muttered. No one died, Ivy said gently. But we're worried. Her mother sighed. I'm just tired. That doesn't mean I'm broken. You fainted, Mom, Ruby said, kneeling beside her. You need help. I've needed help before. That doesn't mean I want to be a burden now. You're not a burden, Ivy said quietly. But pretending everything's fine doesn't help any of us. Their mother's eyes flicked to Ivy's. And what about you? You already carry enough. This firm, your clients, that man sniffing around again. Ivy blinked. What? Rowan, she said. I saw his name pop up on the news again. You think I don't notice things? Ivy opened her mouth, then closed it. Their mother continued softer now. You want to fix everything because you remember what it's like to have nothing. I get that. I lived that. But sometimes the bravest thing is letting someone help you, Ivy. Those words struck deeper than they should have. That night, Ivy sat alone in her apartment, a bowl of soup untouched beside her, the city lights casting soft glows across the floor. Her phone vibrated once. Rowan. I heard about your mom. If there's anything you need, anything, I'm here. She stared at the message. Let it sit, then type. She's stable. But things are changing. I'm tired, Rowan. His reply came slower this time. Then let me hold the space. Even if it's quiet. Even if you say nothing. Tears gathered in her eyes. Not from sadness, but from the ache of someone finally offering to stand beside her without asking her to perform strength. She didn't reply, but she didn't delete the message either. Outside, the rain had stopped, and for the first time in days, the city exhaled. The next morning, the light crept in slow through the slats of Ivy's blinds, grey and muted like the city hadn't quite decided to wake up yet. She sat at her kitchen table, untouched toast growing cold beside her, sketchbook open but blank. The pencil in her hand hovered, then dropped soundlessly to the page. There was no space in her mind for clean lines. Her mother's care plan was still unresolved. Ruby had to pick up an extra shift at the diner, and the design firm, despite its recent wins, needed her to be fully present, leading, shaping, reassuring, always steady, always sure. But Ivy didn't feel sure. She felt frayed, quietly unraveling. A soft chime pulled her attention. Email from the campus project manager. Site walkthrough confirmed for noon. And Rowan would be there. She closed the laptop, stood slowly, and stared out the window. The fog hadn't lifted. By midday, Ivy stood at the base of the redesigned atrium, steel beams stretching above her, light streaming in from the new skylight. The construction crew moved around them, careful, efficient. The vision was taking shape. It should have felt like triumph, but she felt like she was holding it all together with invisible thread. Rowan approached from the west corridor, hard hat in hand, a clipboard under his arm. He wore a black peacoat over a simple shirt, no logo, no branding. Just him. "You look tired," he said, his voice gentle. She didn't smile. "That's becoming a theme. Walk with me?" She hesitated, then nodded. They moved through the space together in silence, footsteps echoing softly against concrete floors. She noticed how he didn't try to fill the quiet, how he kept pace beside her without asking for more than she could give. Finally, she spoke. "I don't know how to hold everything right now." "You don't have to." "I do. That's how this works. I can't afford to collapse." They stopped near a section of the mezzanine where light spilled across freshly sanded wood. Rowan turned toward her. "What if it's not about collapsing? What if it's about setting something down? Just long enough to breathe?" Her eyes burned suddenly. Too fast, too sharp. "I don't get to set things down, Rowan. My mother's health, Ruby's shifts, this firm, this project, I carry all of it. Because if I don't, who will?" He didn't answer immediately. Then, softly, "You've been carrying alone for so long you don't even know what it feels like to be supported." She looked away. "I'm not here to fix it," he added. "I just want you to know I see you." Her jaw clenched, holding back the wave rising in her chest. "You saw me once before too, and you walked away." "I know," he said, voice raw. "And that moment changed everything I believed about who I was. I can't undo it, but I can show up now, and not leave." She looked at him, eyes full and guarded. "I don't know if I trust that." "Then let me earn it, day by day, no shortcuts." A crew member called to him from across the floor. He gave her one last glance, steady, patient, then walked off to handle the issue, giving her the space she needed. She stayed in place, the air thick with things she hadn't said. Behind her, Marcus approached, tablet in hand, brow furrowed. "You okay?" he asked. "No," she said honestly. "But I'm trying." He nodded. "You've been, somewhere else lately. I can cover more on site if you need time." She looked at him, and for a moment her heart twisted. "Marcus, are we okay?" He blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you and me. The way we used to talk, work together. It feels like we're drifting." He looked down, jaw tense. "I guess I just thought we'd always be building the same thing. Together." "We are." He hesitated. "Are we?" "Because it kind of feels like you're building something else. With him." Her throat caught. "It's not like that." "Then tell me what it is, Ivy." Because I've been here since the beginning, and suddenly I feel like I'm watching from the outside." She didn't know what to say. Marcus turned away, nodding like he already understood. "I'll handle the city inspector this afternoon. You should go see your mum." He walked off without waiting for a reply. That night, Ivy stood at her mother's bedside, watching the slow rhythm of her breathing. The TV played quietly in the background, an old black-and-white movie no one was really watching. Ruby sat in the corner, scrolling through her phone, exhaustion carved into the lines of her face. "She asked for you earlier," Ruby said softly, but she fell asleep again. Ivy nodded, brushing a loose curl behind her ear. "I'll stay a while." Ruby stood, grabbing her coat. "Text me if anything changes." When she left, the silence in the room felt heavier. Ivy moved to the window, pulling the chair close, sitting down slowly. "I don't know what I'm doing," she whispered. Her mother stirred, eyes half-lidded. "You always say that, but you always figure it out." Ivy turned. "You're awake." "Just barely." Her voice was raspy. "You look like the sky feels." Ivy gave a weak laugh. "Cloudy. Full." They sat like that for a while. Then her mother reached out. "You don't have to do everything alone." "I don't know how to not." "Start small. Let someone hold one piece." Ivy squeezed her hand gently. "I'm scared." Her mother smiled faintly. "Good. That means you're close to something true." Outside, the sky began to clear, and Ivy, for the first time in a long time, let herself cry. Not because she was weak, but because she finally understood it didn't mean she had to be alone. The rain came down hard that morning, steady and relentless, as if the city itself were holding something in. Ivy stood in the middle of the studio. A sketch rolled out across the work table, but her eyes weren't on it. Her thoughts were elsewhere, scattered, tight, loud. Nothing was working. The sample shipment for the cafe project was delayed. The tile rep for the campus build was ghosting her calls. Marcus was still keeping his distance, quietly professional, but something had closed off between them, and her mother's follow-up appointment had been moved again, leaving more questions than answers. But what unraveled her most wasn't any of those things. It was the simple, undeniable truth pulsing beneath all of it. She was tired of holding the line, of proving she could. Cal walked in with a clipboard and hesitated when he saw her face. "Everything okay?" he asked. She didn't look up. "Not today." He nodded slowly. "Want me to reschedule the client review?" Let's just get through it." He stepped out, and Ivy reached for the edge of the table, gripping it until her knuckles went pale. She blinked hard, once, twice. Her chest ached, not in the physical sense, but in the way exhaustion curls inside you when you've been holding your breath too long. Footsteps came from behind. She didn't have to turn around to know it was him. "Ivy," Rowan said, his voice low, careful. She stayed still. "This isn't a good time." "I know, but I heard about your mom's last scan. I wanted to check in." She finally looked at him. "Don't," she said quietly. "Not today. I can't carry your concern on top of everything else." He nodded. "Then let me carry it instead." She shook her head, stepping back. "You keep saying that, but you don't understand what that means. You show up with kind words and patient eyes, and it feels good, Rowan, it does. But you get to choose when. You get to step in and out. I don't." "I'm not stepping out," he said, firmer now. "I'm here. I've been here." "For how long, though?" she asked, voice cracking. "Until it gets inconvenient. Until you remember who I used to be and realize it still makes you uncomfortable." He flinched, just slightly. "That's not fair." "No," she said, her voice rising. "What wasn't fair was standing outside your office all those years ago, soaking wet, starving, humiliated, and being laughed at like I was invisible." He was silent. "I've buried that moment so deep, Rowan, she continued, "but it still lives in me. Every time I walk into a boardroom, every time someone underestimates me, I remember how small I felt, how easily you dismissed me." "I was wrong," he said quietly, "and I've been trying every day since I saw you again to show you that I know that. But you can't undo it. I'm not trying to erase it," he said, stepping closer. "I'm trying to be someone who earns the right to stand next to the woman you are now. Not because I pity you, not because I'm trying to fix the past, but because I see you, Ivy. I see the strength, the pain, the brilliance, and I want to know you, not just the polished version, all of it." She looked at him, tears filling her eyes without permission. "What if I don't know how to let that happen?" "Then let it break a little," he said. "Let it crack. Let yourself be messy. You don't have to be perfect with me." The room was quiet, except for the rain tapping against the windows like a steady heartbeat. She finally sat down, the weight in her legs too much. Rowan didn't speak. He just sat in the chair across from her, hands folded, waiting, not pushing, just being there. After a long silence, Ivy looked up. "I'm scared," she whispered, "that if I stop moving, I'll fall apart." He leaned in slightly. "Then fall apart, and I'll still be here." Something broke loose in her chest then, not a scream, not a sob, just a long, shuddering breath. She didn't cry loudly. She didn't crumble. She just let go. And he stayed. Later that evening, Ivy walked into Norma's bookstore. The lights were low, the smell of old pages wrapped around her like a familiar embrace. Norma stood at the back counter, sorting receipts, her reading glasses pushed up into her hair. "Well," she said, not looking up, "you look like someone who's finally run out of strength." Ivy gave a breath of a laugh. "That obvious?" Norma glanced over her glasses. "You carry your exhaustion like armor, Ivy. Always have." "I don't know what I'm doing anymore," she admitted. Norma set the papers down and came around the counter, reaching into the back room. She returned with an old dusty sketchbook, Ivy's, from over a decade ago. "I found this tucked behind a stack of poetry. You left it here." Ivy opened it slowly. Inside were designs, raw and unfiltered. Pages of hope scrawled in smudged graphite and ink. On the last page, a note in her handwriting. "I don't need to be rescued. I just need someone to stay long enough to see me become who I already am." She ran her fingers across the faded lines. Norma watched her. "Maybe it's time to stop doing everything alone." Ivy didn't speak, but something in her heart answered. It was time to stop surviving and start allowing herself to be seen. The morning after her visit to the bookstore, Ivy woke before the alarm. The world was still dark outside, Seattle not yet stirring. For once, she didn't immediately reach for her phone or the day's list of demands. Instead, she sat on the edge of the bed, holding the old sketchbook in her hands. That note, her own words from years ago, kept echoing back. "See me become who I already am." She had spent so much of her life proving she was worthy of space, of attention, of being remembered. And now, for the first time, she was starting to believe she had nothing left to prove. Her phone buzzed softly. A message from Marcus. "Morning. I'm reworking the lighting tier for the East Wing. Want to meet before the vendor call? Short, neutral, still guarded." She typed a quick response. "Yes. Let's meet in the materials room at 8. The studio was quiet when she arrived. Marcus was already there, sorting through LED panel specs and making notes on a large clipboard. He looked up as she stepped inside. "Hey," he said. "I didn't expect you this early." "I didn't sleep much," she replied, setting her bag down. "You?" He shrugged. "Sleep's overrated these days." There was a pause before she stepped closer. "I need to say something," she began, "and I want you to let me say it all before you respond." Marcus set the clipboard down and leaned back against the counter. Okay. I know things have shifted between us, she said slowly. And I haven't handled it well. You've been my anchor for so long that I didn't notice how much I leaned on you. Not just professionally, personally. And when Rowan came back into the picture, it stirred up things I thought I'd buried. It's not fair to ask you to carry that. I see that now. Marcus was quiet, watching her. I don't know what I'm walking into with Rowan, she admitted. But I do know that no matter what happens there, you're part of the life I've built, and I want you in it. I don't want distance, I want honesty. His face softened. Ivy, you don't owe me an apology for growing. I'm not apologizing for growing, she said. I'm apologizing for not telling you what was happening while I was. He smiled faintly. Okay, that's fair. She stepped closer. You're not on the outside. You're still in this with me. Every blueprint, every site plan, every deadline. You're part of this heart. He nodded, blinking a few times too quickly. Then we're good, he said, voice rougher than usual. She smiled, reaching out to squeeze his hand. We're more than good. Later that afternoon, Ivy walked the perimeter of the nearly finished cafe project with Celine. The younger woman was flushed with excitement, holding a paint sample in one hand and a notepad in the other. You were right, Celine said. The sage green gives the wood more presence. It feels like a memory and something new all at once. That's the balance, Ivy said. Design isn't just style, it's story. Celine beamed. I hope one day I'm half as good at reading a space as you are. You will be, Ivy replied, if you keep listening. They paused in front of the main counter. The tilework was almost complete, sunlight catching on the glazed edges. Celine hesitated, then asked quietly, Why did you take a chance on me? Ivy looked at her. Because someone once took a chance on me when I was just a girl holding sketches and questions. Celine nodded, emotion flickering behind her eyes. Thank you. Ivy smiled. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you've had to revise the same fixture layout 5 times because the city changed its code again. They both laughed, the sound echoing against the high ceiling beams. Later that night, Rowan called. She let it ring twice before answering. Hi, she said softly. Hi, he replied. How's your mum? Stable today. Tired but stubborn as ever. Sounds familiar. There was a quiet smile in his voice. Want some company? He asked. She hesitated. I made progress with Marcus today, she said instead. It was overdue. We cleared the air. I'm glad, Rowan said. He matters to you. He does. There was a pause. Then, carefully. And me. Ivy leaned back against her kitchen counter, the hum of the refrigerator filling the space between their breaths. I don't know where this is going, she said. I still don't know if I'm ready, but I'm not running anymore. I'm not hiding. That's enough for me, he said. For now. Silence again, this time peaceful. I'm proud of you, he added. You didn't know me before. No, he said. But I'm getting to know the woman you've become, and I like who she is. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the words settle. I'll call you tomorrow, she said. If the day doesn't bury me first. I'll be here either way, he replied. No expectations. When she hung up, Ivy stood in the stillness of her kitchen, heart steady. It didn't feel like falling. It felt like opening. And that was something she hadn't allowed herself in a long, long time. The morning of the final presentation arrived with skies as grey as brushed steel and air that smelled of distant ocean and new beginnings. Ivy stood in the glass-walled conference room on the 20th floor of the Thatcher Tech building, looking out over the Seattle skyline. Her reflection hovered faintly in the window. Poised, calm, a woman who had carved her way forward without shortcuts. But inside, she felt the familiar flutter of doubt, low and quiet, like a hum she'd learned to live beside. Behind her, Marcus was arranging their boards, double-checking the screen connections and running over the layout booklets one last time. His presence was steady, grounded, exactly what she needed. "You sure you want to lead this one?" he asked without looking up. "You've had a lot going on." "I'm sure," Ivy said. She turned to face the table, laying a hand on the materials that represented years of work, risk, and unrelenting persistence. "This isn't just a pitch, Marcus. This is the part where we stop proving and start owning what we built." He met her eyes then, a quiet pride behind his. "I'm with you," he said. The door opened. Rowan stepped in, flanked by 2 board members and a project lead. He wore no tie, no pretense, just a calm expression and a nod that meant more now than any greeting could hold. As the room settled, Ivy stepped to the front. She didn't need notes. "Good morning," she began, voice clear and deliberate. "This project is about more than square footage and workflow. It's about creating a space that reflects the people inside it, a place where innovation and humanity don't have to compete." She walked them through each element. Sunlight-infused break spaces, modular collaboration pods, sound-balanced design that allowed for both energy and focus. Every choice was intentional. Every detail lived with purpose. Halfway through the presentation, just as she transitioned into the renderings, the screen behind her glitched, lines distorting across the images, a soft chime of system error flashing across the corner. The air shifted. Ivy froze for only a second, then exhaled. "No problem," she said. "Let's pivot." Without breaking stride, she picked up the print boards and laid them out across the table. "These designs aren't just digital," she said. "They're tangible, real, like the way we work, like the people we work for." The room leaned in, engaged. Marcus moved beside her like second nature, adjusting the boards, anchoring the moment. And Rowan, he watched her not with worry, but with something deeper. Recognition. Respect. When the pitch ended, the room was quiet for a moment too long. Then came the nods, the murmurs, and finally, a voice from the end of the table. "This is the future of the company," the CFO said. "Not just the building, the vision behind it." As the team filtered out, Rowan stayed behind. Ivy was gathering the last of their materials when he walked up, hands in his pockets. "You didn't need a working screen to impress anyone." She glanced at him, a small smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "Technology fails. Design doesn't." He chuckled softly. "You were incredible." "I know," she said, meeting his gaze. There was a beat, then another. "I want to ask you something," he said, more tentative now. "But I need you to tell me if I've earned the right to." She tilted her head slightly. "Ask." He stepped closer, but not too close. "Would you ever consider letting this become something more? Not just coffee, not just quiet dinners, but something real?" Her breath caught, just slightly. She looked at him, really looked. "You've shown up," she said softly. "You didn't rush. You didn't push." "I won't ever ask you to forget," he said. "Only to trust what we're building now." She nodded slowly. "I'm not there yet, but I'm not closed off to it either." "That's more than I hoped for." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I came across this," he said, handing it to her. She unfolded it slowly. It was a photograph, an old one, of the very same building she had once stood in front of, soaked and desperate, 17 years ago. Before the renovations, before the glass and gloss. "I asked archives to pull it," he said. "I needed to see what I missed. I needed to remember what it looked like when I didn't see you." She held the photo in her hands, heart aching with memory. "You don't need to keep looking back," she said quietly. "I don't," he replied. "But I want to remember, so I never make the mistake of looking through someone again." The room faded around them, just for a moment, as if the world had slowed to let the moment land. Ivy folded the photo and tucked it into her bag, then looked up. "Come by the cafe site tomorrow," she said. "I want to show you something." He smiled, the corners of his eyes soft. "I'll be there." As she walked out of the conference room, Marcus caught up beside her. "You were right," he said. "This wasn't about proving anything." "No," Ivy said. "It was about claiming it." They stepped into the elevator, the city waiting below them, humming with possibility. And for the first time in her life, Ivy wasn't reaching for anything. She was standing in it, fully, completely. Home, not in a place, but in herself. The next afternoon, the light fell golden across the brick-paved courtyard outside the cafe site, casting long, warm shadows over scaffolding and tool carts. The project was nearing completion. Paint cured, fixtures mounted, the final furniture delivery set for next week. There was a softness to the air, a pause between what had been and what was about to become. Ivy stood at the threshold, arms crossed loosely, watching as Celine directed a team of interns adjusting the custom shelving near the windows. Her voice, once timid, now carried with calm certainty. Ivy smiled to herself. This wasn't just a build, it was a becoming. She heard Rowan before she saw him, his steps steady across the gravel walk, the soft creak of the fence gate opening behind her. "You're early," she said without turning. "I figured if I was late, I'd lose points." She glanced over her shoulder. He stood there in a dark coat, hair slightly tousled from the wind, a bouquet of lavender and eucalyptus in one hand. He offered it to her. "For the space, not you, unless you want it to be both." She took it slowly, surprised by the gesture's restraint. "Thank you. It smells like calm." "It looked like calm," he said, "and you've earned some of that." She walked him through the space, pointing out the design choices Celine had made, the small decisions that layered warmth and dignity into every inch. "She's going to be good," Rowan said, nodding toward Celine. "She already is," Ivy replied. "She just needed someone to say so." As they reached the back of the cafe, Ivy stopped near a wide arched window, newly restored. The view overlooked a narrow alley filled with climbing ivy and quiet light. "This used to be my escape," she said, softly. "Years ago, when I'd sleep on the floor of the bookstore, I'd come through here and sit with a coffee I couldn't afford. I'd watch this building and imagine what it could be." Rowan looked out the window beside her. "And now it is. Because of you." "Because of all of it," she corrected. "The mistakes, the silence, the nights I wanted to give up." She turned toward him, eyes steady. "I don't regret that you laughed at me." He blinked, surprised. "Because it forced me to build something I could stand inside. Not just physically, emotionally." "Ivy," he started, but she held up a hand. "I'm not saying it didn't hurt. It did. It shaped me. But now I get to choose how the story ends." He swallowed. "And do you want me in that story?" She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Yes, but not as the man trying to rewrite the past. As the man willing to walk beside me while I write the future." His breath caught, not dramatically, just that slight, involuntary shift when something lands deeper than you expect. "I can do that," he said. "No armor, no expectations." She smiled softly. "No saviors, just present." They stood there a while, side by side, the scent of paint and fresh wood mixing with lavender in her hand. As the last of the daylight slanted through the windows, Celine called over from the front of the cafe. "Ivy, you should come see the signage. They just mounted it." Ivy turned toward her, eyes bright. "Be right there." Rowan touched her arm lightly. "Go, this moment's yours." She looked at him. "Ours. We all built this." Then she stepped forward, into the light, into the sound of her name being called with pride, into the space she had once only imagined. Rowan stayed behind for a moment, looking around the room she'd made from pieces of herself. Then, quietly, he followed, not to lead, but to witness. Just as she had asked, the opening day of the cafe arrived with a kind of stillness that felt sacred. The rain had held off just barely, the clouds hanging heavy above Seattle like a thick grey ceiling that softened the edges of everything. The street outside buzzed with quiet anticipation. Neighbors, community partners, city reps, and a few curious strangers, all gathering to see what had taken shape behind the glass. Ivy stood just inside the entrance, one hand resting on the back of a reclaimed wood chair, the other tucked into the pocket of her coat. The air was rich with the scent of ground coffee, fresh pastries, new paint, and something more subtle. Peace. Not perfection, but peace. The final touches had gone in the night before. The menu boards had been hung, the lighting adjusted, the last coat of finish dried just in time. Celine had barely slept, her adrenaline carrying her straight through sunrise, and now she paced near the counter, double-checking everything with a kind of purposeful panic Ivy knew too well. "You're ready," Ivy said, stepping beside her. Celine looked up, her eyes wide, glassy with nerves. "What if I mess it up?" Ivy smiled gently. "You will, eventually. That's how you know it's real. But what you built here, this matters." Celine's throat bobbed, and she nodded, blinking fast. They turned as the front door opened and the first guest stepped inside. Then another, then a wave. The cafe filled slowly with voices, movement, life. Someone sat near the arched window. Someone else snapped a photo of the corner bookshelf Ivy had insisted stay untouched, stacked with paperbacks donated from Norma's store. Norma herself arrived just after 10, wrapped in a deep purple scarf and leaning on a cane she refused to acknowledge. "Well," she said, scanning the space, "looks like you've done the damn thing." Ivy laughed, the sound breaking open something in her chest. "Looks like we did." Norma squeezed her hand. "She's good, that one," she said, nodding towards Celine. "She is. She reminds me of you, all fire and fight." Ivy tilted her head. "I hope she reminds herself of herself." Norma gave her that knowing look, the one Ivy had received 1,000 times, always at the exact moment she needed it. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. "I'm proud of us," Ivy replied. Across the room, Rowan stood near the corner booth, a cup of coffee in his hand, watching her. He hadn't approached yet, hadn't interrupted. Just stood, patient, steady, taking it all in. She walked over slowly, weaving between tables and half-heard conversations. He smiled the moment she reached him. "This place feels like you," he said. "Warm, thoughtful, brave." Ivy looked around the cafe, her eyes landing on every choice she'd made. The color palette, the light, the angles of the chairs, the open shelves above the barista bar. "It feels like home." Rowan gestured to the booth beside him. "Can I steal a moment?" She slid in across from him. The cushion creaked under her, soft and familiar. "You haven't asked for much," she said. "I haven't needed to," he replied. "You've already said so much." There was a pause, one that lingered but didn't press. "I want to tell you something," he said. "And it's not a pitch, or a confession, or some perfectly crafted line." She raised an eyebrow. "That's a good start." He set his cup down. "I've spent most of my life building things people could admire, spaces, systems, numbers that made sense, but none of it ever made me feel known, not the way you do." She looked at him carefully. "I don't need you to be poetic. I'm not trying to be. I'm just being honest." Another pause. Then she said, "And what if I told you I'm still not sure what this is between us?" "I'd say that's fair," he replied. "And I'd tell you I'm not in a hurry to label it. I just want to keep showing up." whether we're building something or just holding space for each other to breathe. She leaned back, the weight of his words folding into her slowly. I can live with that, she said. Outside, the clouds shifted slightly. Not gone, but softer. The light broke through in quiet patches, casting soft beams across the sidewalk, the windows, the brick. Ruby arrived just after noon, hair pulled back into a loose bun, a Togo coffee already in hand, and exhaustion still etched into the corners of her eyes. But when she stepped inside, they lit up. Whoa, she breathed. It's beautiful. Ivy walked over and wrapped her in a tight hug. I'm proud of you, Ruby whispered. I know I don't say that enough, but I am. You didn't just make this happen. You made it mean something. They sat together for a while near the window. Ruby talked about their mum's new care plan, the home nurse who was surprisingly kind, the way their mum had started listening to old jazz again, the soft smile she gave when Ivy's name came up. She told me something yesterday, Ruby said you become the kind of woman she never got the chance to be, and that she hopes you'll keep choosing love even when it scares you. Ivy blinked slowly, eyes burning. She said that. Ruby nodded. I think she sees how much you carry, and how much you've let go. Outside, across the street, Ivy spotted a young woman sitting on a bench. Late teens maybe, hood up, shoulders curled in against the wind, a too small backpack on her lap. Ivy stood quietly. I'll be right back, she said. She stepped out into the street, the wind brushing gently through her coat. She approached the girl slowly, not wanting to startle her. Hey, Ivy said softly. You okay? The girl looked up. Her eyes were wary, tired. Just sitting. Ivy reached into her pocket and pulled out a small paper card. It was handwritten. Simple. Free meal plus coffee inside. No questions. Just warmth. She handed it to the girl. Come in when you're ready. The girl took it, her fingers trembling slightly. Ivy didn't wait for a response. She just smiled, turned and walked back across the street. Back inside, Rowan watched her as she returned. There was something different in his gaze now. Not awe, not admiration, recognition. You okay? He asked. She nodded, easing back into her seat. Just remembering. They sat together in comfortable silence, the sounds of laughter, espresso steam, and slow jazz wrapping around them like the city itself was breathing. Celine approached a few minutes later, flushed with pride and disbelief. We're getting low on everything, she said, half laughing. We might run out of muffins by 2. Ivy smiled. That's the best problem we could have. Celine paused, then reached into her apron and pulled something small from her pocket. A folded scarf. Old, faded, soft beige wool. I found this on the coat rack this morning. It has your initials stitched inside. Ivy took it slowly, heart hitching. It was Norma's scarf, the one she'd been given all those years ago, the one that had wrapped around her shoulders the first night she found shelter. She hadn't even realized it was missing. She looked up, toward the corner where Norma sat sipping tea, and their eyes met. Norma nodded. Ivy looked down at the scarf, then over to the girl across the street still gripping the card in her hand. She stood again, walked back out into the chill air. The girl looked up surprised as Ivy gently offered the scarf. You'll need this more than I will, she said. The girl took it with wide, grateful eyes, her voice barely a whisper. Thank you. Ivy smiled, then turned back toward the cafe, heart full. Not because of what she had built, but because she finally understood. She hadn't built it to prove anything. She'd built it so others could begin. And as the rain returned in soft, steady drops, Ivy stepped through the cafe doors and into her legacy.